All right. Well, hello, everyone. It is Dr. Siobhan here with Relatable and the Made Marriage Show, episode number 4. We are moving and grooving, and we are already on episode number 4. This is the show where I interview real wives just like you to learn how they make marriage work, right? Because we all know that great marriages don't just happen by chance. We don't just fall into our lap, but that marriages are intentionally made by the choices, the way we think, our reactions, our perceptions. And so much of that starts with our mindset and the thoughts we tell ourselves and the stories we create. And so with that in mind, I just encourage you to think about this question. How are you thinking about your marriage, right? How are you thinking about your marriage right now, and how might that be influencing the results that you're seeing, for good or for bad, right? You may be thinking great thoughts about your husband and your relationship together, and you're seeing all of that. Or maybe you're kind of in a funky place, and maybe you're sort of focusing a little bit on the negative, and maybe focusing on what's not working is creating more of what's not working. So I throw that question out there for everyone to consider, like, how are you thinking about your marriage right now? So that is just food for thought for everyone. But I am so excited tonight to get started with our featured wife, and I am going to let her introduce herself to all of you. And I'm going to pose the question as she introduces herself. How do you make your marriage work? So take it away.
Hi, I'm Ebony Spade. I am from what we call the DMV, the Maryland area. I am a nonprofit executive. I've lived here most of my life. I would say one of my big ingredients to making marriage work, I would say, is forgiveness and flexibility. I think that those two things have been relevant, in any stage of marriage. And forgiveness to me is just being able to say, I'm going to move forward from this moment. I'm not going to allow this moment to go into, any other season of our life together. So I would say forgiveness is definitely one of the things and flexibility in making marriage work.
I love that. And I love the alliteration of it all. It's like my favorite thing. So forgiveness and flexibility. Fantastic, right?
Yes.
So we have people joining us. Like, say hello if you joined us. Like, this isn't, a one-way conversation. We want to engage with you that are watching us live. I'm so excited to see many of you have made the time to do so. So just say hello. Let us know that you're there. We'd love to know who you are. And while you're doing that, Ebony, why don't you tell us a little bit about your love story, like how you and your husband met and all of that good stuff?
Yes. So my husband and I met in a band. My husband plays the keyboard. I sing. And so we met in a gospel band, a gospel go-go band. And yes. And so we met in April. It's a little bit up for debate. He says March. I say April. We met in April, and over the next couple of months, my husband actually told me that he never wanted to get married. And so he said he never wanted to get married. And so we were just friends starting in April. By July, he proposed. So 3 months into dating.
No, I have to stop you. Like, I cannot tell you how many 3 months short time period people we have. My husband and I dated for like 5 years before that man proposed. So I'm like in awe of these people who have these very short periods of dating before they get engaged. So that's awesome. So 3 months. And after he said, I don't want to get married. You're just
friends. Like, I'm never getting married. I'm never sharing my stuff. Mm-hmm. So we got engaged in July, and we got married in December of the same year. And
wow. So you were not wasting any time.
Yep, a couple of months, and we were us.
Wow, that is great. So thank you for all of you who are saying hi to us. We see your comments. Yeah. I don't want to say hi and like interrupt Ebony as she was talking to us, but we see your comments. Thank you for engaging with us. So tell me then, Ebony, what would you say about marriage has surprised you the most?
Well, I would definitely say the initial communication barrier really surprised me. It's just like we agreed on so many things, and I was so surprised that we agreed on it, but we had different perspectives on how to handle it. And so it just really surprised me. The whole becoming one is a process. And with the communication barrier, we had to learn other ways to talk. And so I'm a talker. He's not really a talker. And so email became another communication style for us when we couldn't sit at the table and talk. So I would say the initial communication barrier, it really surprised me.
Got it. And by barrier, what do you mean? Like, what did it look like having a communication barrier to you early on?
So we were raised in kind of different houses with different types of communication styles. For example, my family is very loud, very, in your face. Whatever we feel, we say it. And he didn't grow up in that same type of environment. So he was used to not having to confront everything. And I was used to confronting everything. And so initially, when we had a disagreement, I would want to confront things right away. And he needed time to process. He needed time to walk away, think about what was said. And so that was the beginning barrier, because I wanted things to be solved and he wanted to wait until he had time to process and think about things. So that was the initial barrier between us. And like I said, email and different ways of communication really helped us to overcome some of those barriers.
That's good. So this is such a good point. And I can't tell you how many couples I talk to have similar issues where one has a different communication style than the other, and it creates a lot of barrier, creates a lot of conflict, and just trying to sort of negotiate and figure things out. And so with that, I'm curious to know, how would you say that being married to your husband specifically has helped you grow, whether that's in figuring out how to negotiate your communication or in other areas that you guys, are very different? And how have you been able to personally sort of grow even into a better version of yourself as a result of being married to him specifically?
Yeah, so I would say that I learned that to allow those differences to enhance me. So instead of focusing on how we're different, really taking on some of the things that I was fighting against initially. For example, my husband has really taught me to think a lot more before I speak. And I think that's something that I gained from his style of communicating, but also in our communicating with each other, that everything doesn't have to be said right away. That really taught me, even in the marketplace, and how to deal with people with different communication styles and people that are introverted. And so I would definitely say thinking a lot longer and more before I speak is something that I gained from my husband. It's really enhanced my life all the way around.
That's fantastic. That's really good to hear. So let's think back to pre-married Ebony, right? Like before you guys met, before you got engaged. What are some of the things, like if you could go back in time and tell your single self, what conversation would you have with her, knowing what you know now about what marriage takes?
I think one of the things that I would really think about to my pre-married Ebony is knowing the difference between deal breakers and preferences. I feel like when I was single, I spent a lot of my time worrying about preferences, like how somebody looked, or, a lot of details that now I know aren't really important, and honing in on a few deal breakers. What are some things that if I don't have these things, that the marriage wouldn't survive, but not focusing so much on things that don't matter, like preferences, my own preferences. So that's one thing I would say to my single self, is really think about what are the deal breakers. And a deal breaker for me is he had to be a man of God. Like I wanted a husband with a relationship with God. To me, that was a deal breaker. But saying that he was tall and bald headed was not. That was just a preference.
That was on my list too. I traded it for a man of God as well. My husband is not tall and bald.
He is not tall and bald. So yes.
Yeah. Good. That's great. I mean, I think that's so important. And I think back to, a trip my girlfriends and I had when we were all single in our 20s. And we were all just like coming out of these relationships where we had focused on the things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
And we were laying on the beach. I'll never forget this. We were laying on the beach and we wrote down a list of all the characteristics we wanted in our future husband. And we just, we did everything, like all that tall, dark, and handsome, all of that stuff. But then we were really conscious of, okay, like, does that package really matter? No, like, this is a person that has, love for his family, his mother, his relationship with God, all those other things that matter most. And it's so funny how God delivers exactly what you need, right? Because there were certain things on that list, and I'm sure the same for you, that I needed in a husband, right? They're like just what you said, like your preferences versus, the things that really matter. And it's so funny because when I met my husband, I just chuckled and I knew it was God because it was the things that really mattered, the things that I really needed, that he knew then that I needed in a partner for life. And I'm seeing how those things are unfolding now as we go on and on. So I could not agree with you more. So if there are any single women, or if any of you that are watching know of single women, like, make sure you share this and make sure, that they're just reminded of that perspective as they wait for their husband to arrive. So thank you for that, Evina. That was really profound. What would you say, right? I think that, given the range of people that may stumble upon this video, that there may be someone at a point right now where, their marriage is literally falling apart, where they feel like, divorce or separation, it's just an option that's on the table, that things as they've been going on are just not working. What would you say to that person? And I'll just make the caveat, like, we're not talking about any situation where someone is being abused, where their safety is in danger, where their children are in danger. We're not talking about those situations. Definitely, if you find yourself in that position, get help from the appropriate resources. But in other situations where maybe they just drifted apart, or, there's something that happened in the marriage that really they feel like there's no way to work around it, what would you say to the person watching who's in that position right now?
So one thing that I would say is, I think one of the most important things is don't be afraid to talk to someone, and talking to someone alone and together. That some of the issues that need to be worked through in relationships sometimes are our issues. Sometimes there are relational things happening, but sometimes there are very personal things that are happening with us. And I think about after the birth of our first child, I experienced postpartum depression, and that was a very painful season for our marriage. And knowing that things like that will happen, it was good for us to talk to our support team. So definitely have a support team. If you don't have one that's already created, create a support team, someone that is interested in seeing your marriage work. And I think that's a big piece of advice, not just anyone, but someone who's interested in seeing your marriage work. But that in that painful season for us, it really helped us to breathe while talking with people who could really encourage us to stay married, encourage us that this was just a moment, this is just a season. So I think that it's important having that support team, hopefully around you before it happens, but even if it's after, building that team of people who can encourage you to keep going, who can help you remember why you came together.
Yeah, that's so true. And it reminds me, last week we were talking with Tanya Barnett, and she mentioned that a very long, rough patch in their own marriage, and that what helped them most was actually going to therapy individually. That, they had their own set of issues that they needed to work on within themselves, and then they could figure out how to work on the marriage. And I cannot, underscore that enough, that sometimes you have to look at the two people that are interacting with each other, and you have to look at them as separate individuals and what baggage and issues they may be bringing to the relationship that need to be looked at, because marriage is a mirror. Like your spouse is a mirror to all the places in your life that you need to pay more attention to, that you need to grow, that you need to develop, and they're going to push those buttons and set those triggers, because that's the alert signal. That's God telling you and showing you the ways that he wants you to grow so you can become the person that he created you to be. And a lot of times I feel like couples may enter therapy with the goal to change the other person, right? They want this objective person that's really just going to tell their spouse all the things that they're doing wrong. And, people are sometimes afraid to really look within at what they need to do to make the marriage work, to make themselves work. Because if you're not working, your marriage isn't going to work. So thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree with you more there as well. What are some things, Ebony, you feel like no one tells you about marriage that people just need to know? Like if you were writing a book on like, before you get married, these are the things you absolutely need to know. What would be included in it? What would you say?
Yeah, one thing I would say is definitely what you just said. Do the work on you first. Make sure that you're in a healthy place to get married and that you are ready to share your life with someone else. And not just share like your life, but share you. And I think that marriage really invades a big part of your space, your mental space, your capacity, like, your will. A lot of parts of you that you don't even know sometimes are explored once you get married. And so really doing the work to know yourself, I think is important. But also another thing that, I wish that I knew is that even when you check off all the boxes and you feel like we've done the work, there is still work to be done. Mm-hmm. That the work doesn't stop. You have to continually invest in your marriage if you want it to grow. And I think that that is something that can't be stressed enough, that you may be good at communication, good at intimacy, good at all the things, but there will be still opportunities to continue to grow, investments that still need to be made.
Yeah, that is so well said. So well said. I don't have anything to add to that. It was perfect. What are some of the rituals or like healthy practices that you feel you and your husband try your best to pay attention to, right? Because there's always the best intentions. But what are some of the things you've been able to successfully do, or some of the things you really try to make sure you do on a regular basis that you think make for a healthy marriage?
So one thing that we do consistently is have a trip alone and then a trip with the children. And so I feel like that's been a really healthy practice for us, is having a trip alone and a trip with the children. Also, date nights. Date nights are important time where we can just like unplug and really hone into each other. But then kind of like we have enhanced date night where quarterly we just get away. And it's something local. It's nothing, extensive, but it's just one night or 2 nights away where we just spend time with each other every quarter. And for me, I love hotels. Like that's something that, I don't know, something about a good hotel. And so every quarter we can spend that time, what I call just getting away from it all. And I call it some other things too, but just in case there are singles watching, I won't say what I really call it. But
I got you.
But it's a time where everything comes off. There is no connection to anything else but each other. And I feel like those quarterly getaways have been more substantial for us than the date nights, because we have the expectation that nothing else is coming in the room. And, we set up systems where we don't have to worry about the children and these different things, because those times are really times where we can strip away everything else and really, concentrate on each other and give ourselves the intimacy and communication that we need. So those are some of the rituals that that really we've mastered, and I'm glad about that.
Yeah, those sound amazing. They sound amazing. That is great. Thank you for that. So here we go. We're going to get to the fun part. So for all of those that are watching, I want to ask you, how long do you think Ebony has been married? So just put your comments in the comment box. I know it takes a little bit of time. There's like a little bit of a lag time between I can see them. So put your comments in. How long do you think Ebony has been married? And while you're putting those comments in and making your guesses, Ebony, I'll just ask you, you know, what um, what do you feel like husbands need to know that they don't always remember about being married, right? So just in case there are any husbands watching, or just in case you as wives want to like go back and tell your husband what you heard today on this episode, what do you think some things that husbands need to remember?
I think one thing that is important for husbands to remember is about the investment. You know, that it really remembering that it's not mechanics. Like marriage doesn't just work. You know, and I think this is something that it took a while for my husband to realize. And so I think, you know, understanding that marriage doesn't just work because we're together, but it actually takes investment and it takes work, and that work doesn't have to be hard work, but it does have to be intentional. So that's something I would say to husbands is, you know, make sure that you are giving your wife time, because sometimes, at least I can speak for my husband, he gets busy. He's a working man, and I love that about him. He's serious about getting his job done, and provider can get on the top of the list, and he can forget about paying that attention to us. And so that's what I say.
That's great. That's great. All right. So we have some guesses here.
Okay.
This is always so exciting. So we have someone that's guessing 17 years, someone says 18 years, someone says 13 years. So those are some of the guesses. So, Miss Ebony, why don't you tell us how long have you been married and how long have you been making your marriage work?
I've been married for 16 years. We will celebrate 17 years in December. So somebody was close, but it's 16
Yes,
years.
Jasmine, you were close. Good job, Jasmine. Here's your gift. Like if I could give you a gift for like coming close, I would give you a gift. So fantastic for those of you who guessed in the realm of, but clearly she's a veteran, right? So Ebony, what parting words of advice or wisdom or quotes or scripture, what would you like to leave as sort of your final comments to anyone that's watching right now?
I would say never stop dating. Don't let the fire go out on your marriage. Keep it hot. And no matter what stage of marriage you're in, the beginning, the middle, if you have been married 10 years, 20 years, you know, keep it hot, and remember that the thing that it took to get your spouse and all the things that you did so that they knew that you were into them. You know, keep doing those things. So I would say keep it burning, keep it hot. Don't stop investing in one another.
Yeah, and I think I have to say, you know, as a mother of a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, it's so easy to give yourself a pass on those things, to like forget. You don't really forget, but to push to the side that extra effort that you used to make when you were dating. And I think I was having a conversation with someone today. I was like, yeah, you know, when my husband and I were dating, I would like cook for him and like bring his food to work sometimes. And now it's like, you know, you're lucky if you can get like, you know, a lukewarm meal sometimes. And, you know, I really had to check myself on that. And I think so often we create this image of ourselves when we're dating that we don't fulfill once we get married. And maybe some of that's just expectations we have of ourselves that we're not able to meet. But at the same time, I think sometimes we give ourselves a little bit too much permission to stop doing the things that drew our spouse both and do. And so you're hook to get him, and remembering what you did show your love to him is something that still needs to continue. That just because you're married now doesn't mean that he gets it and you don't have to put forth the effort anymore. So that's super helpful and important.
I would also like to just say to you, Siobhan, if I could, that, you know, I was also the person with 2 small kids in our marriage. We had a baby and a 1-year-old. And that phase is really hard. You know, there may be some other women that are watching that also have small children, and that can have an effect on your marriage. And understanding that as a team really helped us. And so I just want to encourage all of you that it's really a moment that the kids get older. Like our kids are now 11 and 13. And so the kids get older and that phase passes. So to remember that even if it's like text messages now and not as many date nights, but if it's hot text messages that you send each other, just remembering to keep that intimacy growing, even though you have those other things that may, get in the way.
Yeah. And it's such an important mindset shift, I think, to give yourselves permission, especially when you have small children. And I think that first child, especially for us women who are like the mama bears that are like, nobody can watch my child. I have to be there. I have to do everything. Now I see, and I've said in a post before, like the greatest gift you can give your children is a healthy marriage. And a lot of times we pour ourselves into our children as mothers, not remembering or not keeping in mind how important it is to have a healthy, happy home for them. And now I'm ready. Like my parents are coming for the 4th of July. I was like, oh, great. Like we will see you later. Like we'll be out. So we are ready to get our little time away and reconnect in those moments that we can really do that. So Ebony, this has been such a great conversation. I am so glad that we connected and that you agreed to be a guest on the show. And definitely, if you all enjoyed this, share this with your networks, share it with your friends, share it with everyone. And what I love about the conversation that Ebony and I just had is it's a conversation that we all can have, right? And so I'm excited because I get to do this in person too, and I hope to see Ebony in person too in the DC area at the end of July. I have an event. If you're in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area or can get there, I encourage you to join us live. We will be having these types of discussions. It's all about wives supporting wives. It's all about us having these real conversations about what it takes to create and maintain a happy marriage that lasts. There's not enough of us supporting each other in this way, encouraging each other, sharing tips, what's working, what's not working. And a lot of times we feel alone and we feel isolated, like I'm the only person dealing with this. I'm the only person trying to figure this out. And that's not the case at all. So this is an opportunity for us as wives to get together, to encourage each other, to empower each other, to equip each other with all that we need to make sure our marriages work. So if you are interested in that, definitely check out my page, Relatable. There's an event there. You can get all the details right there. And maybe Ebony and I will see some of you there on July 29th. So thank you again, Ebony. This has been fantastic. You've gotten lots of good comments from those who are able to join us. So thank you so much. And for everyone watching, I'll be back next week, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern, here on Facebook for another great episode. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.